okay to evolve and understand that adaptability is key as you're evolving and really start to narrow in to understand what is your horizontal landscape and your vertical landscape. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's segment right here on the Product and Packaging Powerhouse. I am your host, Megan Young Gamble, and also Chief Project Officer at GLC, which serves as a packaging and project execution team for health, beauty, wellness brands and some CPG brands. And for today's segment, we are going to be highlighting and observing this special day, especially those who are project managers in their respective fields, which is International Project Management Day. So before we get into it, make sure you do follow, like, and subscribe to our platforms. And make sure so that way you do not miss any episodes that we drop right here on the Product and Packaging Powerhouse. And so for today, it is International Project Management Day. This is a very special day, near and dear to me, especially with me being a project manager and also other project managers in all the industries. Okay. First and foremost, this is a national observance day, respectfully in the project management space, where it's really highlighting, encouraging, and celebrating the project managers that are on your team. A lot of you all who are working in the various industries may not be able to get your projects, really up and running without a project manager helping to lead the efforts, taking the brunt of a lot of things behind the scenes, all the coordination that is happening to ensure that they have all the information to cascade to all the different stakeholders and more, guys. So before you do anything, make sure you give a shout out, highlight, acknowledge a project manager that is on your team. Those small things, and as we say in the project management space, we always want to celebrate our wins. And so by you celebrating a project manager that is on your team, part of your team, cross-functionally, or even externally, give a shout out to them because that means a lot to us in everything that we do. And so, as part of this special observance day, I wanted to really highlight and really showcase what it's like in the day of the life for me in my role as a packaging project manager, a beauty project manager overseeing new product development, and then also some key things I've learned during my tenure as a project manager. So, I'm not going to get into like my full story on this episode. If you want to see more about my respective story, you can check out episode number 2, where I talk about my detour to destination journey. And on this journey, I really highlight, how I went from pharmacy to car rental and then project management, which has ultimately led me into the packaging space, respectfully in beauty. And so check out that information. The link is down in the show notes for you all to definitely get more insights of my respective journey and what it was like and all the picture it moments that I had along the journey. So I have a lot of picture it moments because Golden Girls is one of my favorite TV shows of all time. I love them little spicy women. But Sophia, respectfully, on the show, before she always starts the story, she always says, picture it, because she wants you to imagine as she is really highlighting and talking about the picture and also her story. So I'm going to tell you the same thing, as I share a little bit about what's the day in the life like for me as a packaging project manager and a beauty project manager, because those are two different roles, and also things you should consider as you're transitioning to the space. And so, in addition to just thinking about like get into the role and salaries and things of that sort, I'll talk a little bit about it on this episode, but I'm not going to go really in depth, into the space because there's so much to talk about in reference of what it takes to transition into this industry. And so I do have a podcast episode that really talks about transitioning into the beauty project management space, what that looks like, insight on salaries and skill sets. And so you can check out that episode that is down in the show notes for you all as well, because I'm giving more insights of what that's like. So we'll talk a little bit about it here, but if you want more details, check out that episode. Okay. So as part of this International Project Management Day, it's special. It's near and dear to me because I've been a project manager now for really over 12 years, but certified officially as of 8 years to date. So I had my own humble beginnings. I talk about it on episode 2, Detour to Destination episode, more extensively. But one thing I would really say that I've really enjoyed about my career is really the opportunity as a project manager to work in various industries, because a skill set is is transferable. You're very adaptable in various situations in various industries. Now you may have to learn the candor and what it really takes to produce whatever product, whether it is in fintech, whether it's construction, whether it is beauty, whether it's packaging, whether it's manufacturing, whatever industry that may be. You may have to learn some more of the intricacies of what it takes, overall. But we have the foundational skills and really the framework, especially if you're a certified project management professional, a PMP, like I am, through the governing body Project Management Institute, then you understand that we have the framework and we adjust and tailor the framework as we need to based upon the industry that we're in. Okay. So give a shout out to a project manager, because I know you have one, you know of one somewhere. Give a shout out to them. Okay. And so as we're thinking about the story, I want you to picture it, because I want to share what a day in the life is like for me and really the core differences between a packaging project manager and a beauty project manager. So with me operating my company now and thinking about my humble beginnings of when I did get my certification as a PMP 8 years ago, how I transitioned into a space in health beauty. That's really where I was exposed to the health and beauty industry, and how I really started off very green in that space, even though I had project management experience previously, but I was not officially certified. So one thing I always tell people before I tell my story is, a lot of times people have the misconception that just because you're not certified that you're not a project manager. And I disagree with that. I feel that every single person is a project manager to some form or degree. So when you think about it, if you have led efforts through, your local PMI chapter to oversee and coordinating in speakers, that was one of my key roles. And that's why I took on that role, so I can start learning, how to really start curating different experiences and booking guests and stuff like that. That is a skill in itself, and that's part of project management based upon the schedule that we had to host events for. So it's a lot of planning, a lot of scheduling, different things of that sort. If you volunteer for an organization or for even your kids' events, and you understand how extensive it is to get all the different activities and events and functions and everything scheduled, especially if you think about field day for kids. Okay. Coordinating a field day for kids is a whole project in itself, because you want to ensure that the kids are having a great time during field day, having the engagement from the teachers, from the other parents that may be there, getting the vendors. So you're doing a lot of budgeting, and a lot of times y'all don't have a budget, because the budget is non-existent, right? So you may be paying for things out of pocket. That in itself is a project. To if you planned a wedding, I use my wedding as one of my experiences on my application, because planning a wedding over the course of a specified period of time, that is a lot of work. Okay. So it's a lot of budgeting, a lot of scheduling, a lot of estimating, a lot of coordination with stakeholders. So stakeholder management. You have risk management with the wedding. I can even think about my own experience and such, to even when I bought my house, that is a project. So I personally believe that every single person is considered a project manager. Like, look at how you're navigating day-to-day life. You're a project manager. Okay. So shout out to you as well, who is listening and viewing this episode. But if you're becoming a certified project manager to really utilize and leverage within your career, then kudos to you, because now you're actually taking some of your everyday skills and experience and transferring that into the professional space, and now becoming certified, where you now have a framework thanks to the governing bodies There's a couple of them out there. One of them that I use is with Project Management Institute, PMI. And you have the framework that now you can go into various industries and know how to lead a project. Okay. So I had to say that because, some people always say, well, I'm not certified. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, everybody's a project manager. If you're a mom, if you're a dad, if you're a caretaker, if you are even single and you have no other person to be responsible for and you just trying to manage yourself, you are a project manager at the end of the day. Okay. Because everybody is dealing with something and managing some aspect of their life in the current stage. So shout out to you all too. Okay. So now I want to just share a little bit about like what a day in life looks like for me as a project manager, respectfully packaging and beauty. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the key things for each role and then also some things I've learned along the way too. So now I'm going to tell you to picture it, okay? Like Sophia from Golden Girls. So picture it. You go to the store, you pick up that product off the shelf. I'm going to just say perfume because I just sprayed some perfume on, okay? Some Gucci. So you just picked up perfume, you picked up the box. First thing that you automatically experience is that sensory experience because you smell the perfume. Second thing that you may see or have a sensory or tactile experience is the feel of the box. Okay. Because a lot of the print that may be on the box is very sensory to have that elevated experience, especially based upon the price point of this respective fragrance. Then from there, you take it out and you see how you have the insert liners inside of the box to help protect the glass bottle of your fragrance. And so I'm sharing this because if you think about just those three steps of when you actually pick up that box, you're taking it out the box, that is part of what we're considering high level from a packaging project management standpoint. So in that regard, when people ask me, what do I do as a packaging project manager? I try to give them different real life scenarios for them to think about, especially for my industry. So I primarily work in health, beauty, and wellness. Beauty is probably the number one category for my respective business, GLC, packaging and project execution team. And so when we think about that, and I highlighted, I said, that's high level and that's the end step. But if we think about all the different things that is required, before it gets to you as a consumer, you have that sensory experience because you can smell the perfume, you can feel the box, you open up the box and you see how the bottle, the glass bottle is protected. There's a lot of things that we had to think about and really manage to make sure that you as a consumer are able to pick up that bottle and use it and experience or help living up your experience, through fragrance and such and help, elevate your moods, etc. And so just to think about just in this case from a perfume standpoint, a couple things we have to think about as a project manager. The first thing is which market is this going to be into? Which retailer? Is it US? Is it Canada? Is it Latin America? Is it EU? Is it Africa? Is it Australia? Where is it going to be placed? That is some of the foundational things we have to think about before we can even craft out a timeline because we have to factor all considerations to then understand, okay, what is the quantity? Because that then impacts the price of the bottle, the formula, of the secondary packaging, which is going to be the box that you may have more of the tactile feel, the insert liners for protection, master shippers. Do we have to palletize it? Depending upon where it is going, etc. So we're having to capture a lot of those things in advance. And then also considering, is the brand going to be doing pre-orders, pre-sales, PR, web release before a retail release? Those are a lot of things that we have to consider very high level. So then once we kind of know the scope from the brand, we can then say, okay, when formula is being done, that's a whole separate track. From a packaging standpoint, respectfully, as a packaging project manager, I'm having to think through what is the testing protocol for the packaging? Who is going to be conducting the packaging? How long does it take for the packaging? How many iterations do we need to account for the packaging? And the various tiers of packaging, primary for fragrance, the bottle. If we possibly have a label on the bottle, that's secondary. Or if there's no label on the bottle and it's direct print on the bottle, depending upon price and the quantities, then we may have the secondary packaging, which may be the folding carton and the liner to help protect the glass bottle. Then we may have to think about the tertiary packaging, which is going to be the master shipper cases. How many units of the secondary packaging will fit inside of the master case? Does it need to be palletized? Where is it going from fulfillment standpoint? And does it need to go to a retailer's distribution center? So I have to think about those considerations to think about from testing standpoint. Is it drop testing? Do I have to consider drop testing, edge crush testing, vibrational transit testing? Do I need to think about deco adhesion? Do I need to think about photosensitivity? All of that's part of testing, to help ensure the packaging is going to be intact once it gets to the final destination and filled with the formula. Then artwork. Artwork is such a critical thing for packaging because it displays all the information that we as consumers need to know about the product. And so let me just say this, the life of a packaging artwork manager is a whole skill, and that in itself is a separate project management function. That could be its own role in itself if it's not encompassed within a packaging project manager's role. In my case, I do the whole packaging aspect, and in some cases, I may be hired to just focus on packaging artwork because that is extensive in itself, depending upon the number of SKUs, the approach, etc. If you want to learn more about what it's like in the day of a life as a packaging artwork manager, make sure you check out my episode with Christina Troutman. We talk about that in similarities and some challenges we've experienced both working in that space. But packaging artwork is a critical role because you are working with numerous stakeholders to ensure that you have all final information to then go through the routing process with all stakeholders, some internal, some external, to ensure that everybody is aligned on the information that is going to be on the packaging. Okay. So artwork, when I say artwork, people always think it's just graphics. That's one element. But I have to know the graphics to make sure it is in budget based upon how it's kicked off, like I mentioned earlier, right? So from an artwork standpoint, it is more than just the graphics. That's the pretty shiny things to capture the attention. But the information on there is the most critical element. And then on top of that, you have to understand, working alongside of your stakeholders, what is the regulations that are in place for the market that these products are going to be launching into. So that's why I said earlier, knowing where the product placement in the market is going to have this product be housed in is so critical because that determines the regulations and that determines determines the artwork or the information required on the packaging. Because if I'm going to Canada, I must have French translations as well as English. If it's US only, not a requirement to have French. But if I'm expanding into the EU, we need to have French. And then I have to consider who is the responsible party that is helping to oversee the product and be the responsible party for this respective brand internationally in the EU region. A lot of things to consider. So I'm working very extensively with regulatory. Okay. So you have the packaging artwork stage. Then you also have, possibly, your line trials and stuff like that of the packaging, starting to get range boards. So you're starting to have like a little bit, have quality in place before you go into mass production to help mitigate like any issues and stuff like that, to then get in transit of the packaging to the location for it to be filled, then assembled. So that high level is a packaging project manager. And it doesn't really, there are going to be some variations and differences depending upon which industry you may be in, especially for product-based businesses and those project managers, packaging project managers that may be working more exclusively with products, hence packaging, right? But high level, we're thinking about the same things overall. Now, I shared a little bit about what the process is, respectfully from a packaging project manager standpoint. And that's really what I think about and what my role is when I'm hired to work as a packaging project manager. Now, when I'm working as a beauty project manager, this is also considered an NPD project manager. I am not only focusing on the packaging aspect, but I'm also looking at everything from conception to launch. So in the prior example where I shared a little bit about, high level packaging project management and what things I will be considering from beginning to end, well, not only am I thinking about the packaging, I'm also now thinking about what does it take to create this finished fragrance perfume to be available in the market. So still using the fragrance perfume, the brief. So I still need to understand the market. I need to understand the quantities. I need to understand the number of SKUs because there could be different variations of the fragrance that we are actually creating. There could be different types of packaging that we're considering. So we're still thinking about what is all the details that we need to capture up front in order for us to build out that critical path from beginning to end as a new product development project manager. Okay. So in this case, for formulations, I am not creating the formulas, right? But there is a product development team that is creating the formulas alongside of the respective brand. It also could be a contract manufacturer, a turnkey, not a turnkey, but a private label manufacturer who is curating the fragrance to then produce it in mass quantities based upon the quantities the brand wants to launch with. So therefore, even though I am not creating the formulas, I must look at, okay, if we want to get to market by this date, that means I need to backtrack and really strategize on when do we need the final formula approval to then start kicking off safety testing of the formula simultaneously with packaging testing, what I mentioned with the packaging project management. Then I'm thinking about what is all the requirements needed to get to land on the final cost of goods based upon our initial budget from the initial brief from the brand to, producing the packaging, the various tiers of packaging. So remember in this fragrance bottle example, I mentioned that we have to think about producing the bottle, the glass bottle, determine if we're going to do direct deco onto the bottle or if it's going to be a label. We then have to think about the secondary box, which is the tactile part that I mentioned earlier when I said picture it when you get to the store. Then also, how do we protect the glass bottle that is inside of the secondary packaging? To then thinking about, okay, how does it get to the final contract manufacturer for filling those glass bottles with the final fragrance formula? And then the primary packaging or the glass bottle in this case is getting assembled into the secondary box with the liner to help protect the glass bottle and then getting it to our final destination, which may be your 3PL, and then 3PL ships it out to go to retailers. So all of that, I have to consider everything from conception to the retail shelf. So if retail wants it by X date, when do I have to have those finished goods completed by to get them to the retailer's distribution center? So then I need to think about when does the finished goods need to dispatch from the respective contract manufacturer. And all manufacturers are not in the US too. So you have to be mindful of that, of transit time contingent upon where your manufacturers may be. To then backtrack into that to see, okay, when do I need to have packaging be delivered to the CMs? So then backtrack from there to think about what does the line trial look like and the pilots look like for a mini production run to simulate what mass production will look like. To then backtrack from there, the production of each respective packaging tier that's needed. To backtrack to that, artwork, to backtrack to that, testing, packaging, and safety testing of the respective formula. We're not even including like consumer user testing and if there's anything that may have, for a respective product that may have clinicals that's required, such as SPF products or an acne product or a drug product. Those are things we have to consider. So guys, that critical path could be very long. And at the end of the day, a lot of brand owners and founders and CEOs, their main thing is speed to market. So as a project manager, respectfully from an MPD project management standpoint or a beauty project manager who is looking at everything from conception to the retail shelf, literally, there is a lot of strategy that is required. And sometimes looking at all those numbers, because you're looking at a lot of dates, I feel like I could have been an accountant. The way I'm looking at numbers extensively day in, day out, and seeing which things can be parallel path and which things cannot. And it has to be more of a waterfall approach or the traditional approach, to understanding what actually may require us to be more agile and which things I have to consider from a Scrum standpoint. So I really have to make sure that my toolkit is properly equipped with the right approaches, depend upon the companies I'm working with, depend upon the scope, depend upon the number of products and or SKUs, to the markets that is launching into, to retailers, and all key considerations. And we ain't even talked about sustainability because that has to be factored into that either from the at the kickoff part, first off. And those things has to be thought about throughout each stage gate of the process. So guys, that's high level the differences of what a day in the life is like and things I have to consider from an MPD beauty project manager standpoint, which is from conception all the way to the retail shelf, versus a packaging project manager where I'm still looking at everything from conception to shelf. However, I'm only focused on just the packaging gates. It's not considering everything else. So, those are two major roles of how people get engaged with me and my company at GLC to serve as the packaging and project execution team, for the brands, and just things that I have to consider, and things that I've had to learn working in the space, especially respectfully for beauty space, health and wellness, to make sure that I have created my own framework using the framework and the foundational aspects as a certified project manager. So when I say you need to give a shout out to a project manager that is on your team, I'm saying that because we're doing a lot of strategy, a lot of planning, a lot of coordination, a lot of babysitting, being honest, a lot of babysitting, amongst the teams. And we're human too. We're tired. Everybody's tired. Don't get me wrong. But as a project manager, we're always thinking and strategizing and coordinating and babysitting and trying to see, okay, how do we compress this and how do we compress that? Okay, I got leadership that's saying we have to hit speed to market. We cannot push this lunch date out or whatever. What does that mean? What approach do I need to now pull out from my toolkit? We are juggling a lot in our respective pursuits. So that's what I'm saying. Give a shout out to a project manager on your team, because that will mean a lot to them in your company, personally, that you may know in your network. Give a shout out to them. Okay. And so, as we're starting to wrap up for today, I thought it would be good, since we are acknowledging International Project Management Day as of this year, which is on November the 7th. I thought it would be good, just as the moment of completion, to kind of round us out for today, to share 7 things I've learned as a PM. And so this is going to be very high level. We are not going to go very deep into it, but I think it's something very important, not only just as a project manager, but also when I've really assessed my career and the various opportunities I've had to work with various brands, and how quickly we've had to move and pivot from certain things, and also just my Rolodex. To date, I really consider myself more, I am a project manager, and that will always be my heart. But I've also grown and evolved to a portfolio manager, especially in beauty space, because a lot of the brands that do hire me, they're they have a portfolio of products that they're either launching, rebranding, relaunching, new packaging, all those things. And so at one given time, I looked at how many projects or SKUs that I may be managing at one given time, and at on average, it may be about 20 that I'm managing for one brand at a given time. And if you're not familiar of working at that type of speed and key considerations you have to think about for all those SKUs simultaneously, and then you may have multiple clients you have to think about, it can be a lot. But I will say my training and my experience has really helped groom me to be able to look at the full picture, look at the 10,000-foot view, look at the portfolio, and then be able to really laser in and get started and starting to go to the micro level of the projects, to then determine how do we, approach this across all the SKUs. So I've evolved, from project management and program management, and now portfolio project management for the brands that I had the opportunity to work with and continue to work with in my career. And so I'm saying all that to say, for my 7 things I've learned as a PM, the biggest thing I've learned is being okay with the evolution and understanding that adaptability is key. And I say that is because as you become a PM, or as you are a PM and you start to evolve and grow in your space, you really understand and start to really hone in on what is your specialty as a PM. And I say that because, a lot of times people think as a PM, you should do everything. And don't get us wrong, we do. But there is a reason why some of us have specialties and niches within the field versus being general. So I always talk about this horizontal and vertical landscape. So I always say, as a horizontal landscape, this is where you're considered the generalist. You know how to do everything, which is great. And it's like the jack or Jill of all trades. You know how to do a little bit of everything. But when you start going vertical landscape, this is where the niche comes in. This is where your specialty comes in. And so, as a project manager, we have project managers who only focus on quality. We have project managers that only focus on estimating. We have project managers that only focus on change management, risk management, stakeholder management. That's the vertical landscape. And so it's very similar to, like, for me, for my industry, my niche. I am very niche specific. Can I go work in any industry? Yeah, I can go work in fintech. Yeah, I can go work in construction because I have the framework. That makes me the generalist. But I am very, very intentional and very aware of what my key industry is. And my vertical landscape within my industry, I know packaging, I know new product development, respectfully for beauty, health, wellness. Can I go into pharmaceutical? Absolutely, because I have the framework and its similarities in pharmaceutical like it is in beauty. So, yes, that would be an easy transition. Can I go into food and beverage? I've worked in food and beverage, worked with one of the top food and beverage companies in the space, as part of working as a packaging project manager, so yeah, I've done it. I can do it. But what is my strength, and seeing like what is that vertical landscape in my specialty? My specialty is planning and the execution phase, hence execution team, so like, can I do it all? Absolutely. And I have to do it all in order to effectively plan and execute. However, am I working on quality? I know quality quite a bit. And quality is encompassing everything that I do. I know risk management, I know change management, I know all process groups of project management. Okay, there's all the knowledge areas, there's 10 knowledge areas, 5 process groups. So I know all of them, right? My specialty, if you are trying to focus on speed to market, efficiency, and as part of your operations, that is going to require somebody who has extensive experience in planning and execution, period. So that is my specialty. So be okay to evolve and understand that adaptability is key as you're evolving, and really start to narrow in to understand what is your horizontal landscape and your vertical landscape. So I would say that's the first thing I've learned being a PM and just evolving as a PM in this space. The second thing I would say is the power of communication. Let me say this. As a project manager, you are working with various stakeholders, internal, external, and how you communicate with the team, first off with your core team, to then having that work cross functionally and then also externally. It requires a special skill of communication. And I would say for me, I continuously refine my communication skills working in the space, because how one company does things versus another could be totally different, especially if you're a consultant and you're starting to work with various clients simultaneously. You have to flip on, flip off certain aspects in the communication. However, if you start to build out what is your communication roadmap that is going to be consistent for every single client, and you do not waver, that helps with making sure that you have a solid communication plan. You are able to articulate that to the brands. You're able to display that in your communications, your rollouts, your updates, high level reporting, things of that sort. So it all goes hand in hand. But the power of communication is key, because you need that power of communication to help drive these projects. You are not going to drive the project solo. You have to have a team. And in order to have an effective team that is working collectively together, communication is key. Okay. And so the third thing I would say as part of communication, and this is going to be something hard for people to understand, but I'm going to go ahead and just put it out there. Be okay with saying no. I know that seems hard, especially if you are green in the space. If you've been a project manager and you've always been a yes person, that is not always going to fly, right? Now, when I say be okay with saying no, you're going to have to challenge, go against certain grains and certain things and be okay with it. And you have to stand on business when you do say no. So, what I mean by that is not saying that you should always say no, but in some cases, you may be asked to make it happen or to consider this, or how do we do this? Or, oh, I thought we had more time. That's the name of the game. And that's the common thing. All of us as project managers here, I thought we had more time. No, no, unfortunately, no, we do not have more time. We've exhausted X amount of time on the front end to go through one, two, three. And now, since we're here, this is where we're currently at. Can we make a pivot? Unfortunately, no, not at this stage, unless you want to pay to do so or push out the launch. So you have to be very strategic of how you say no, but be okay with saying no. And I tell people this, especially as a business owner and as a woman, I get questioned all the time. And, I tell people, you can question and ask me all day. Some cases, I will see what can be done. But in some cases, I'm going to tell you, unfortunately, not at this stage, not in this case. Are we willing to make risk based upon where we're currently at? And I may say that and approach it from that regard to see what is going to be the response before I can say no. And so I have to strategically say no. And I get questioned quite a bit from, different companies and brands and team members. But I stand on business. And so as a project manager, if you're listening to this, if you've always been a yes man or yes woman person, I think that is great in some regard. However, start to build up that tough skin and start saying no. And it could be starting with something as simple as, hey, Megan, can you join this meeting? And you ask, well, what is the context of the meeting? Oh, we just want you to listen in. Unfortunately, I'm not able to attend this meeting. However, I would love to read the recap materials. It can start off as something as simple as that, to then help you become more comfortable with saying no and delegating and declining certain things and seeing how, and especially when you start presenting to leadership, that's a whole different beast. And I know at times that makes it hard to say no too. In some cases, you may say no and you still have to make it happen or find the best way to make it happen. However, if you present all the options on the table, then it helps make more informed decisions. Okay. So then that leads me to point number 4, which is using data to drive decision making. So a lot of times as project managers, we're using a lot of systems and tools to help us with managing and tracking, our respective deliverables and key tasks and milestones and the critical path of a project. And so as part of the system, see how you can be leveraging AI into that. Like I know with Smart Sheets, they have AI incorporated into there now. I love it, where I don't have to manually, calculate every single thing. But if, depending upon what system you may be using, you may still have to do some manual calculations and formulas to help you with the data. So using data to help drive decision making makes a difference. So case in point, for me in the beauty space, I use a lot of data to showcase how long it's taken us to launch a project, or what has been the history of us launching a product, from, especially as an NPD beauty project manager, from conception to the retail shelf, managing all stage gates in between to do so. So I'm looking at, okay, this has taken us 20 months, but you say you want to launch in 16 months. That's 4 months of compressed timing. And in reality, that's really 6 months, because we have to consider getting that product to the retailer's distribution center for it to be available on the retail shelf by the launch date. So what do we do to parallel path? What do we do to help narrow down the critical path based upon what we've always done? To even me being able to look and see, okay, this stage gate has normally taken us X period of time. How do we compress that to have more time allocated on the back end, where we're not exhausting all the buffer up front during this respective stage gate that's using more of the time in the time frame? So data is such a key driver, of looking at it, and even across like resource utilization. That's the biggest thing a lot of us are experiencing in the workforce today is the resources. There's lack of resources. And while companies are hiring, more people that are getting hired are having to do the role of 2, possibly 3 people. Been there, done that. So with that, what does that look like? From a resource utilization standpoint, if you have one person focusing on just one core role, but you have them doing 2 to 3 roles, their percentage allocated towards those other functions of their role is going to be less. But are you expecting the performance to still be there? So using data to help drive decision making and to understand what we've done, where are we going, and what is going to be the future state is so critical because that helps from an efficiency standpoint, operational standpoint, and then also, especially like in any product based business, we have to make sure that we're thinking about speed to market at the end of the day. So, using data to help drive decision making is point number 4. And then point number 5, I mentioned this earlier, but equipping your toolkit as necessary. So, regardless of what stage you're in as a project manager, if you're junior level, if you become senior level, director level, C suite level, equip your toolkit as needed. Because at the end of the day, you may have to go into that toolkit and pull out those different tools to use as needed, especially when there's a critical need or an urgent need in certain aspects. So, understanding, okay, which areas of the stage process, or the of the timeline is going to be driven off a waterfall approach. Which aspects within the timeline can be more agile? Which aspects of here do I need to do 2 week sprints and think about it from a Scrum methodology standpoint? So, thinking about those things and equipping your toolkit to use as necessary is really going to help you to become a better project manager and a better person and better professional overall because you're leveraging those tools as needed. So remember how I mentioned earlier in this episode, I have the framework provided by PMI, Project Management Institute, that is foundational as a project manager. But then I've also curated my own framework respectfully for my company for the brands that I work with respectfully in health, beauty, and wellness as a packaging project manager and as a beauty or a new product development project manager. So, having those different tools is going to be essential to your success and also to your growth. And then you can go and get a higher salary because you now are building up that vertical landscape as well. So, then going into number 6, as you're building out this toolkit as necessary, and I know I mentioned that you do have to be okay with saying no and being strategic of how you say no. But at the end of the day, make sure that you are still being solution oriented. So, like I was talking about when people ask me, can we do something? Some cases I got to tell you straight up, no. In other cases, I'm going to pose it as questions like, well, what risk are we willing to take? Are we willing to pay X amount investment in order to accomplish X? So, to see what their decision is before I say yes or no. And in some cases, I'll say, let me see what we can do to then see how I can be more solution oriented and present the options to then determine what is the final answer. So that's why I said being able to say, be okay with saying no, but using it strategically, but still being able to be solution oriented because you need to see all the pieces of the puzzle before you can make an informed decision as a project manager and standing on business. So asking those questions, and a lot of times, even from my own experience, I've had companies be like, well, I asked you. Yes, and I'm willing to help give you an answer, but in order to help you to make the best informed decision, I need these key considerations to be considered. Are we willing to spend more money? Are we willing to push out the launch? Are we willing to take some risk, based upon where we're currently at within our development timeline for packaging and or formula or wherever we may be? Are we willing to parallel path certain efforts to make the launch? Are we willing to focus on X number of SKUs versus all the SKUs that may be part of this portfolio of products? So I'm asking these questions so they can be like, yeah, because you can't say yes to everything, right? And I remember one of my prior episodes with Rachel Hassel, where we talk about the power of brand value and procurement. She has this great philosophy where she says you get 2 non-negotiables, right? And so even learning from her, I've started to incorporate that into my toolkit, and the questions that I'm asking and helping the brands to understand, okay, here is what's on the table. What are the 2 non-negotiables for this? And that's shout out to Rachel Hassel. So make sure you follow her, and the link for her episode will be down in the show notes for you all to check out as well. So those are the things that you really have to think about and still being solution oriented to help with knowing where we're going. Okay. And so, as part of that, the last thing I would say is after we talked about the power of communication, being okay with saying no, evolving in your career and understanding adaptability is key, equipping your toolkit, being solution oriented, and using data to drive decision making. At the end of the day, you must celebrate your wins. We talk about this as a project manager extensively, and I feel that this is probably the biggest gap we see amongst companies and professionals alike. We're moving so fast and moving on to the next project that has already been in the queue, or we may not have time to allocate to the project that's already in the queue, that sometimes we don't take a moment to just pause and embrace the journey, reflect on the journey, the good, what have been the accomplishments from everybody, what are areas of improvement, and what are things that we could possibly improve on and continue to do going forward as we go into this next project. But the biggest thing is to celebrate the wins. Celebrate your project manager, celebrate your cross-functional team, celebrate the accomplishments of the company, celebrate any awards that have been given. Celebrate some of the things that you may have gone through that seemed like it was hell when you were going through it. And that in itself is, a reason to celebrate. Even celebrate the documentation. Guys, you need a repository of documents so you can refer back to it as part of your analogous estimating, looking at your historical information so you know what you've done before and where you're going now to use. Celebrate anything, anything. And I think, and as I said, that this is the biggest gap I see, where it can be celebrating at the end of each stage, at the end of, oh my gosh, guys, I gave y'all a due date of this, and y'all accomplished this 3 days early. This is a reason to celebrate. I just want to acknowledge y'all and say thank y'all. It can be something as simple as that. So celebrate the wins across your team. Celebrate your wins, PMs, for yourself, because this is not an easy role. Okay. This is almost an Olympic sport of what we're doing. Okay. So celebrate the wins. And so, with that, we are going to conclude for today because as you're celebrating the wins, we're highlighting and observing International Project Management Day. I want each and every person today and going forward to acknowledge and to celebrate a project manager, to acknowledge and celebrate yourself, to acknowledge and celebrate your teams, and to acknowledge and celebrate everything that we're juggling in life and how you are still conquering and moving forward and figuring out a way every single day. And so this is here to celebrate you and to celebrate all my PMs out there, but ultimately to help celebrate you because at the end of the day, each and every one of you all are considered a project manager. So shout out to each and every one of you all. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's segment right here on the Product and Packaging Powerhouse. Make sure you do click the show notes down below to check out some of the prior episodes that I mentioned throughout this episode. And make sure on your respective platform, you give me some love. Give me a 5-star rating. That means the world to me. That lets me know you're vibing with me and also that you think the content is well. And also let us know what topics you would love to hear on this podcast. I have the honor and privilege to speak with industry powerhouses from various business sectors and to celebrate them as well on the podcast and to highlight what's going on in the industry. So you all have insight and key considerations of what you should consider for your respective project as well. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us in the house for today's segment to highlight International Project Management Day. I am your show host and curator, Megan Young Gamble. Make sure you do connect with me on LinkedIn and also learn more about my company, GLC, your packaging and project execution team needs. And you can visit all of our information down in the show notes below. So with that being said, celebrate those wins and let's celebrate you as well. Talk to you soon.